Today on Korea 24, we're delighted to welcome an extraordinary talent in the world of classical music, violinist Randall Gooseby. The music that we're currently listening to is Shelter Island from his debut album Roots, composed by double bassist Xavier Foley. Mr. Gooseby is joining us in the studio fresh from rehearsal for tomorrow's performance with the KBS Symphony Orchestra, which practices just down the hall from us. At 29 years old, Mr. Gooseby has already made a remarkable mark on the global music scene. Born in San Diego to a Korean mother and black father, he began playing the violin at the age of 7. By 9, he made his debut with the Jacksonville Symphony, and at just 13, he performed with the New York Philharmonic. A first prize winner of the 2018 Young Concert Artists International Auditions and recipient of the 2022 Avery Fisher Career Grant, Mr. Gooseby continues to captivate audiences around the world. He's in Seoul this week to perform Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto at the Seoul Arts Centre with the KBS Symphony Orchestra. Mr. Gooseby, welcome to Korea 24 and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
Now, as I just mentioned in our intro, you're here in Seoul to perform Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto tomorrow at Seoul Arts Centre with the KBS Symphony Orchestra. How are preparations going for that concert? And I'm really curious to know how difficult it is, or maybe how easy it is, to quickly build chemistry with an orchestra. And how do you even go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Rehearsals have been great. We've had one rehearsal, which was today. Tomorrow will be our dress rehearsal, and that'll be it before the first concert. It's been a pleasure working with KBS Symphony so far. This is my first time working with any orchestra in Korea. So I've been really, really looking forward to this performance. And Peter Eunjun is an amazing conductor and actually was quite a remarkable violinist during his time. As a player, he actually studied with my teacher, Itzhak Perlman, much earlier on at the beginning of his teaching career. And he, having been a violinist, knows the concerto really well. He knows what parts are sort of tricky in terms of balancing things between the orchestra and the solo parts. So it was incredibly comfortable in that sense to know that there was sort of already, he sort of had his own roadmap already. And there were a couple of moments in rehearsal where he was like, just do what you want, I'll follow. The orchestra will be there for you. So, it was really smooth and easy, great energy from the orchestra. And it was kind of nice that we were in a small studio today so I could face everyone and really feel like I was playing to them. And we were sort of really giving and taking in a more sort of chamber music way. So yeah, we're off to a great start.
Great. And I hope tomorrow's rehearsal goes well also. As I also mentioned in our introduction, you are half Korean. How often do you get to visit Korea and how has your experience been on this trip so far? This
is only my second time. So a couple seasons ago I was here for my just overall Korean debut, which was a recital for violin and piano, which I did at the Lotte Concert Hall, which was incredible. I love coming to Korea. Like I said, it's only my second time, but everyone who I've ever met here has been so nice and wonderful. The food, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned at some other point in the interview, but Korean food is, well, second on the list. Sushi is my desert island food, but any Korean food you put in front of me will be gone, but in a very short time. Love this food and this culture, and I feel in a sense very comfortable and sort of at home here, even though I've only been here a couple of times. So it's been really, really wonderful so far.
Now, I'm so intrigued by your start to music at such a young age. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about that musical journey and how you first fell in love with the violin and what drew you to that instrument in particular?
Sure, yeah. I started violin. I guess I first had one in my hands when I was 7, but I actually started on piano for a few months prior because we were my mother and I were sort of shepherded towards the piano and away from the violin because I was 6 at that time and we were told, okay, you're a little young. Most kids your age, they quickly realize how difficult the violin is, so they end up quitting. What we didn't realize is the guy who told us that, his wife was a piano teacher. Okay. So I think there was a little bit of an ulterior motive there. But it was my mom who first sort of brought up the opportunity in the first place. She just wanted to make sure that myself and my 2 younger siblings had some kind of musical outlet and had the opportunity to learn an instrument. So she said, you have no choice. You're going to learn an instrument, but you can choose what you play. So I chose violin for for no reason at all, as far as I'm aware. And after a few months of struggling with the piano, I was really like hungry to start the violin. So I guess I was a little bit unique in the sense that I was never told to practice for the first year when I was playing. I never even thought about it as practice. It was just, I loved playing it. I loved the sound of it. And so that's kind of how it all got started.
So it sounds like it just came really natural to you at that young age.
I think so, yeah. There was something that sort of called me to it.
Do you still have that? It must have been a very small violin for a 7-year-old at that point. Do you still have your first violin?
I don't have the first one. I have my first full-size violin,
Okay.
which I got when I was maybe 10 or 11. It's quite funny. I mean, I've been very lucky to play on really, really fine antique instruments since I was probably 13 or 14. I haven't played on my own instrument. But in comparison to all these spectacular instruments that I've had a chance to play on, my first violin was factory made in China. My mom bought it on eBay for a couple $100, and it was delivered in a cardboard box.
I love that.
To the front door. So at the time, that was the biggest instrument I'd played, and therefore the biggest sounding instrument I'd ever played. So I thought it was amazing. And my teacher at the time, I went to him for a lesson, and he said, "Can I try that violin?" And he admittedly, it really didn't sound very good when he was playing it. He was like, "I don't know how you're managing to make a sound on this, but I'm gonna help you get an instrument." So from that point on, I've been playing on loaned instruments from societies, or in the case of the instrument I have now, from the Samsung Foundation here in Korea.
And from that young age, who were some of your early musical influences?
Yeah, I think my first love in terms of violinists was David Oistrakh, great Russian violinist from the 20th century. One of my first serious music teachers or violin teachers studied with Oistrakh at the Moscow Conservatory. So, there's something for any of the listeners who know David Oistrakh, that the sensitivity and honesty and sort of vulnerability of his sound drew me in, even at the young age when I didn't know anything about violin. I didn't know why those things were drawing me in, but in hindsight, I think that's kind of what it was. But I've always had pretty varied musical tastes. Probably has something to do with being from a multicultural household. I sort of introduced classical music to the family, so to speak. As soon as I started violin, my mom started gathering recordings. My siblings started playing, but at the same time, my dad, was always playing, hip hop and R&B and soul, Motown on the radio or in the car. I actually remember one of my first albums that I used to play on my CD player was the Legend album of Bob Marley, which is just a collection of all his number one hits. So in a way, I think Bob Marley might have been my earliest kind of musical influence. After that, it was Luciano Pavarotti, Stevie Wonder, Luther Vandross, Parliament Funkadelic. I mean, it's just
such a variety,
kind of all over the place.
Yeah. You've touched a little bit there on your family. Could you tell our listeners a little bit more about your background, your family, and how your upbringing and your heritage have influenced your approach to music and performance as well?
Sure. Well, I'm half black, half Korean. My mom is Korean by heritage, but she was born and raised in Osaka, Japan. So all of her side of the family is there. My dad was born on the West Coast near the Bay. Well, he was actually born in Sacramento and spent quite a bit of time in the Bay Area. They met in Japan at a bar when my dad was over there teaching English as a part of a sort of exchange program. And so they met, became pen pals. They eventually got engaged. I was born in San Diego, where we lived for less than a year before we moved to Philadelphia, which is where both my younger siblings were born. So that's where I kind of became a sports fan with the Philadelphia Eagles and the 76ers. We then moved to Jacksonville, Florida, where I started playing violin. And it was interesting, obviously adding the violin to my sort of, daily routine was a culture boost for sure. But during our time in Philadelphia, I went to what's called a Hoshiko, which is like a Japanese Saturday school. Japanese is my mom's first language, and being enrolled in that Hoshiko, basically, I was fluent in Japanese and learning Japanese at the same time and at the same pace as English. But moving to Florida, I kind of lost that Japanese community. So that part of my culture kind of fell off the wayside, but I guess in place of it, the violin kind of rose up. But I think as far as the impact on my relationship with music, like I said earlier, I think I've got a little bit of a broad scope, I would say, and it's not to say that I'm well versed in any genre as well as I am in classical music, but I have great appreciation for great artists and for great voices and music that really carries a message and has a meaning to it. I think that's part of the reason why I'm largely drawn to music of past eras, including my favorite classical recordings are mostly from by artists who are no longer alive, and I think there was a slightly different meaning and energy around music decades ago and in decades past, which I definitely connect with and continues to inspire my approach to the way that I play and make music.
I want to turn back briefly now to tomorrow's event, which is why the reason you're here in Seoul, and thankfully you've joined us today in the studio. What does the particular piece, Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto, and tomorrow's concert mean to you personally?
That's a very interesting question. I have a long and complicated history with the Tchaikovsky Concerto. I learned it for the first time in high school. And my first performance of it was in a sort of outdoor kind of tent space in Florida. It was in the middle of the winter, but Florida in the winter is still Florida.
Still hot, I imagine.
Hot, humid. Like I said, we're in a tent. It's full of people breathing. And it was incredibly just wet. Like my fingerboard was, I had to wipe it off every time I took the violin off my shoulder. Incredibly uncomfortable. Lots of things didn't go the way I wanted. And so like from the very first time I performed it, I don't know, I just had this negative association about it. And a couple seasons ago, I took it around with actually playing with orchestras for the first time. And I think this must have been the 23-24 season. And I played something like 25 Tchaikovsky concertos. And after the 25th one, I was like, man, this still isn't comfortable. So I told myself, you know what, I'm going to put it down for a little while. And here I am picking it back up, admittedly a little earlier than I expected. But I definitely have a renewed or a heightened sense of appreciation for the piece. I find a lot more of myself in it now, somehow. I think... there's a reason why Tchaikovsky Concerto is probably the most, if not one of the top 2 or 3 most listened to, most recorded, most performed violin concertos ever. It's a mammoth piece of music. It's, 40-45 minutes long, and half of that is just the first movement. Incredibly virtuosic, yet at the same time, really quite sincere and emotional and vulnerable at times. And so I think there's something in it for everyone. Whether you like the sort of faster, more virtuosic, showy stuff, or whether you're into the kind of more hard on your sleeve, emotional, tearjerker side of things, you get both of those ends and everything in between. And I think that's what I think so many of the greatest pieces of music have in common, is that it's not all about one kind of mode of playing or one kind of expression. So I've had to... I've had the opportunity now to study the piece, put it down, study it, put it down, and pick it back up again. So I think that kind of, that's never a bad thing, I think, as a musician, to be able to let a piece sort of marinate in the back of your mind for a year or two and come back to it having lived, a couple of years of life and finding new experiences in the music. Ultimately, I think that's what the whole point of what we do is to kind of communicate not only ourselves, but the composer and the kind of time period that the music is from. And inevitably, the audience will find part of themselves in it. So I think that's kind of why Tchaikovsky has been such a staple for so long.
Speaking of the audience, when you go into a concert like tomorrow, what do you hope the audience feels or experiences? Or as a musician, are you just solely focused on immersing yourself in the music and, trying to get through such a huge piece like you just mentioned?
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily have a specific sort of outcome or association that I wish for the audience to have. not that I'm not playing for the audience, but I think, as you said, this quest of sort of trying to immerse yourself as completely and as honestly, and I keep using this word vulnerable. I think great classical music doesn't happen without that sense of vulnerability and being open to being affected by the music that you're playing. And I think what that forces you to do is let go of any kind of preconceived sort of notions or plans that you have about the music, because on any given day we might feel a completely different way. And I think allowing yourself to be taken in different directions by the same music, in different settings with different orchestras, different conductors, and different audiences, is part of what makes live classical music such a magical experience. Not only for myself as a performer, but hopefully for the audience as well. I think I've heard of countless and widely varied responses and reactions and associations from the audience that it's so broad that I can't possibly try to convey one thing to them. I can know what it is that I'm feeling and hope that they might at some point in their life have shared that same emotion or experience that I'm trying to sort of convey. But at the end of the day, everyone is a completely different and unique person. And I think their own set of lived experiences influences what it is that they find for themselves in the music. So I look forward to hearing what I can from the audience about their reactions and experience.
And it must be so interesting too to hear those different perceptions and how they receive your music. And I have to ask, what's next for you, and what are your future plans and goals?
That's a great question. I certainly have plans to continue performing and traveling and sharing the magic of this wonderful art form. I am going to experience a little bit of a change of pace starting in the fall of next year as I begin my position as teaching faculty at the Juilliard Pre-College. I'll be part of their violin faculty, which I'm really excited about, a little bit nervous about. It's a full circle moment considering that I studied myself in the pre-college, what doesn't feel like that long ago. But teaching and music education in general has been, for as long as I can remember, a really central aspect of what I do. I noticed from a very young age that I never really saw people that looked like me or people that I felt like I could relate to, whether it be culture-based or age-based, when I was on stage. And so ultimately I'd like for that to change at some point, if not for me, then for a next generation of musicians. And it's not just for the sake of seeing different kinds of people in the audience, but I think it's for the sake of providing more opportunities for people to connect in a different way, right? I think music is the unspoken language, is the universal language. Absolutely. For a reason, and I think it's because as far away as we might live from each other and as distant as our customs and traditions might be, we're all human beings and we all share a lot more than we think in terms of what we go through day in and day out. The kinds of relationships that we form, the love that we have for one another. And I think music is such a wonderful way to connect with those parts of ourselves that we might not know or have the opportunity to ask about. I feel this especially when I play in countries where I don't speak that language, because these associations and these reactions to the music exist everywhere. So I think the more kinds of music that we can open up, ultimately the more kinds of people will invite and will make feel welcome in this space, in these concert halls, and in whatever other venues we play. So that's in a really general sense, part of my kind of life goal with classical music is to just make it something that more people feel like is for them, and that more people feel like they have that they can use as an outlet for their own expression or for their own opportunities to connect with people, whether that's through education or performing in alternative venues and spaces where people might not normally expect to hear classical music. I wish it were more specific than that, but like I said, this has been part of my life for so long, and it's led me to so many different places, so many different communities. So I can only hope that will continue.
Well, we wish you all the best, of course, for tomorrow's performance, and we look forward to following your continued success and contributions in the world of music. And thank you so much for Mr. Gooseby for joining us here today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.